We have been studying about the French Revolution, and in our part 1, we studied about the society that was existing during the time of the old regime. This old regime had 3 states. The first state belonged to the clergy, the second state to the nobles, and in the third state there were the other gentry, mostly peasants, small businessman, big businessman, educated people, the administrative officers, and these officers were liable to pay the taxes. We have already studied in the part 1 that there was lot of resentment, as is but natural, which happens in the society when the society is not getting its credit, when it has to do all the work and does not get much return, because the peasantry was not owning the land and still paying all the taxes. The educated people, the administrative officers, they were working for the state and still were deprived of the comforts which went in paying the taxes. We have already studied that taxes was required by the clergy and by the state. Nobles by birth were not liable to pay the taxes because this was their privileged right, and the taxes went to the state because of the maintenance of the army, maintenance of the administrative office, maintenance of the other expenditures and the state expenses of France. Lot of money had gone into fighting the wars, and the money had been taken from the rich businessmen on interest, and the rich businessmen had increased the interest to 10%. As a result, the treasury was going, it was already bankrupt, and it was going under the loan of 2 billion livres, which was the French currency. But what happens in any society? The poor, even if they put up the resistance, they do not lack the expertise, the strategy, and the wherewithal to fight with the rich and the mighty. I think it's from time immemorial, and if we go through the history of all the civilizations, the poor stands at the receiving end. They cannot stand up to the fight, to their rights, because they are poverty stricken. The first priority in front of them is hunger, to fill their stomach, to survive. And as a result, there was a subsistence crisis that was arising in France in the old regime. That is, the supply and the demand was not being met. The supply of bread and food items was in far scarcity to the demand of the growing population. This is what we have already studied in part 1, and from here I'll continue in part 2. Slowly what happened, that with the coming of the education, with the coming of the exposure to USA, because we have already studied that 13 colonies of America became independent from the common enemy, that was Britain. So with the foreign exposure, with rich traders having trade links abroad, overseas, the foreign Western attitude was entering into France. A middle class was being generated. This was the educated class, which had got the education, which had got the ideas, which had got the exposure. This middle class, or this group which was emerging in the third state, this middle class or this group which was emerging in the third state was educated, innovative, and had exposures to the outside world and to new and creative ideas. It wanted to exert itself. It wanted to prove that nobility and birthrights, or the privileges which are given by birth, do not stand at equal footing in any society. They wanted a change. They supported the peasantry movement. They supported the resentment which they had overseen in their own society. They were philosophical thinkers who were coming up. And these philosophical thinkers, they were adding to the views of their own society. And as we all know, that whenever great thinkers, great social reformers, great social creators come into the society, they start the intellectual movement through their ideas, through their viewpoints, and slowly and firmly they guide the underprivileged to stand up for their rights. And this is what was happening in the old regime. The lawyers, the philosophers, small businessmen who were now having access to overseas trade like trade of silk, woolen, textiles were making enough money to sustain these fights. Social philosophical thinkers like John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Montesquieu, these were few of the great thinkers emerging in the old regime in France. And their thinking, their viewpoints, it was becoming a discussion at saloons, at coffee table shops. They were taking out newsletters. They were motivating, instigating people to fight for their rights. These people were educated, they were great learners, they were thinkers, and they believed that no group in a society should be privileged by birth. No group in a society should be deprived of its rights. Every person, every citizen is born equal and should be allowed to have the access to equal opportunities for education, equal opportunities for job, and equal opportunities for sustenance. It is actually the revolution which occurs, the revolt which occurs, is simmering there in the society. And whenever such great intellectuals come into the society, they can feel that simmer because they have arisen from amongst them. They have gone through those tortures, gone through those pains, and they start feeling that the society is equal. And they felt that the prosperity in a person's life should be on the basis of merit, because a class had started emerging. As we have already discussed, it was a middle class, and this middle class was educated. It had access to wealth because it was undergoing overseas trades. It was having small economic ventures in the society, and hence when they was being suffered, they had to be deprived of the rights because of the rights of this first and the second state. They started simmering with resentment, and this simmering with resentment went on and started being felt by those peasants, those farmers, those poor and deprived who were already existing in the society, who had raised their heads to get their rights but could not do it because they did not have the strategy and the wherewithal to support such resentment, such fight. As we all know that the monarchy got its power by the church by giving its divinity. Even in our country, India, the kings were supposed to be gods or God-sent rulers to bring justice to the society. And this was imparted upon them by somebody who was related to religion, because the sanctity of religion, whenever it comes in any of our value systems, in any of our societal orders, it gives it a greater sanctity, a greater worth. And that is what happened even in the old regime in France. The monarchy had birthrights, had privileged rights, and it was granted to it because they were considered as divine. They were considered as God sent creatures on earth to bring justice. This means that they were already placed at a higher pedestal and the other people were placed at a lower pedestal, because divine is always something which is supernatural. Divine is something which creates fear, which creates respect in us. And this divinity was given to the kings, to the monarchs of that time. So, John Locke, in his book, Two Treatises of Government, said that this doctrine of the divine and absolute right of the monarch should go. He started telling the people through his work that monarchy was just one amongst us, and they did not have anything which was very high attached to them. Simply by birth, they were given these rights, and these rights should be and could be refuted in anybody's life, in any community, in any society. We had Rousseau, and he carried forward this idea to a greater extent, and he said that there should be a government which is based on a social contract between people and the representatives. This Rousseau started laying the foundation of a democracy, of a government by the people, of the government of the people, and a government for the people. He started saying that somebody who is just implanted on us, who is placed above us, could not be the correct ruler, could not be the correct government. The correct government is one where there is a social contract between the two, where the government is chosen, government is representing the common people. And who were the common people? They were the people of the third state. They were the people who were in a way running the country through their hard work, through their taxes, through their dedication, and through their commitment of protecting the country by going into army. So it was this third state which was overall running the society, but was being played in the hands of few of the people born in the first and the second state, that is the church and the nobility. There were still other social thinkers also, and one of them was Montesquieu, and he, in his Spirit of the Laws, he proposed a division of power within the government between the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. He went still a step further. The process of change started from one thinker to another thinker, and it was a third thinker who said that there should be a division of power also. It should not be only the government. Now the government should be one which is executing, which is legislating, and which is being judged by a judiciary. And these three should have their roles specified and designed so that the correct government is there in France itself. It is not that these ideas came straight to them. These ideas were already being modeled in USA, because those 13 colonies which had become independent from the British had this role model. The American Constitution guaranteed the individuals their right, and this was an important example in front of the thinkers of France, because they had access to education, they had access to the modern world. So they were hearing, they were learning, they were imitating these ideas in their own country, France. And they were telling people through their writings that what is the correct form of government which could be imitated by them to be run in a better way, so that justice is given to each and every citizen, so that opportunity is given to each and every citizen, so that nobody is deprived of the right to live a decent and a respectful life. And as it is, whenever thinkers start thinking, the society starts moving, and it moves through long debates, long discussions at saloons, coffee shops. Then there were these things, their books were being read in groups, in masses. So the masses were being motivated for this sort of a thinking, the preparation in the society in a way had started, where the society was being prepared with these modern ideas. It was shown the wherewithal of its resentment, of a way to vent out its feelings. And this resentment further got strength when Louis XVI planned to impose further taxes to be able to meet the expenses of the state. Thus, we see that the taxation policy, which was being imposed upon by Louis XVI, was one of the factors which was adding to the fuel of resentment in the society. We will continue in part 3, and there we will speak about the French Revolution and why it happened, taking it to a step further. Thank you.